This is my ranking of tower defense games that I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how strong the strategy feels, how satisfying the wave defense is, and how well the upgrades and tower variety keep the gameplay engaging. Let's get straight into the list. Element TD2 was a game I expected to enjoy, but I did not expect it to have so much depth. What stood out most was how every element choice felt important because it changed which towers I could build later. I spent a lot of time experimenting with different combinations and trying to find stronger setups. The campaign offered plenty of challenges, while the endless mode kept me testing new ideas. I also liked how many multiplayer options were available, from co-op matches to competitive games. At the same time, the learning curve was quite steep, and some systems took a while to understand. Even after many hours, I felt there was still more to learn and improve. This one earns a place in my excellent tier. Emberward immediately stood out because it mixed tower defense with Tetris-style maze building, and that idea worked better than I expected. I enjoyed placing different block shapes to create longer paths, while also finding enough space for stronger towers. Every run felt fresh because the maps, relics, upgrades, and tower choices kept changing, which pushed me to try different strategies instead of relying on the same plan every time. The roguelite structure added good replay value, and I liked unlocking new options as I progressed. The boss battles were also memorable because they introduced unique mechanics rather than simply increasing difficulty. My main issue was that some tower combinations felt much stronger than others, making certain runs easier once I learned the best setups. That secures an excellent tier ranking from me. Diplomacy is not an option, looked like a standard strategy game at first, but the huge enemy waves quickly showed me that survival required much more planning than I expected. I had to balance building defenses, gathering resources, feeding my people, and growing an army at the same time. What I liked most was watching massive battles unfold as thousands of enemies crashed into my walls while archers, soldiers, and siege weapons fought to hold the line. The humor also helped keep things entertaining, especially during the campaign. I spent time experimenting with different approaches in the various game modes, which added a lot of replay value. My biggest issue was that some matches could feel overwhelming when too many problems appeared at once. This one settles into my great tier. Rogue Tower took a familiar tower defense formula and made it feel fresh through its mix of roguelike progression, deck building, and map expansion. I liked how every run forced me to make difficult choices because expanding the path could create new enemy routes and completely change my plans. The card system added another layer of strategy, letting me shape my defenses through upgrades instead of simply placing more towers. I also enjoyed experimenting with different damage types and finding ways to combine effects for stronger results. The random nature of each run kept me thinking ahead and adapting to new situations. My main complaint was that the controls could feel awkward at times, especially when trying to place towers quickly during busy moments. It easily claims a spot in my excellent tier. Dome Keeper blended mining and tower defense in a way that kept me engaged much longer than I expected. I spent most of my time digging deeper underground, searching for resources, and then rushing back to defend my dome before the next enemy wave arrived. What I liked most was the constant risk versus reward decision-making. Every extra second spent mining could mean more upgrades, but it could also leave my defenses unprepared. The simple controls, atmospheric presentation, and steady progression made each run easy to get invested in. I also enjoyed discovering gadgets and upgrades that changed how I approached future runs. My main issue was that the gameplay loop started to feel repetitive after many hours. It finds its place in my great tier. The Spot or Dig or Die had a gameplay loop that sounded perfect for me because it mixed mining, resource gathering, and tower defense into one package. I enjoyed spending the daytime digging deeper underground, collecting materials, and trying to squeeze in a little more progress before night arrived. The constant choice between staying longer for extra resources or heading back to prepare for an attack kept things interesting. I also liked upgrading my tools, expanding my carrying capacity, and building stronger defenses around the base. The humor and lighthearted presentation added some personality as well. Unfortunately, the stamina system became frustrating after a while, and later stages asked for more grinding than I wanted. This goes into my mediocre tier. Relic Guardian was a fairly enjoyable experience, but it never reached the same level as some of the stronger games on this list. What kept me playing was the combat system, which rewarded paying attention to enemy patterns and making the right decisions during battles. I liked learning how different opponents behaved and figuring out ways to counter them more effectively over time. The arcade mode was easily the highlight because it focused on the gameplay without slowing things down too much. I also thought the pixel art, character designs, and soundtrack added a nice amount of charm. The biggest weakness was the story, which felt poorly written and made it difficult to stay invested in what was happening. That is enough to place it in my good tier. Mindustry completely consumed my attention because it combined tower defense, factory building, resource management, and real-time strategy into a single experience that always felt rewarding. I spent hours expanding production lines, moving resources across the map, researching new technology, and strengthening my defenses against incoming attacks. What I loved most was how every system connected together. Better factories meant stronger units secured more territory, and new territory unlocked even more possibilities. There always seemed to be another goal waiting just ahead, which made it difficult to stop playing after a short session. The amount of content and long-term progression felt massive, and I was still learning new mechanics after many hours. Some controls and systems were not very intuitive, but the depth easily outweighed that issue. This stands proudly in my masterpiece tier. Tower Dominion kept me interested with its mix of tower defense, roguelite progression, and path-building mechanics. What I enjoyed most was having control over how the enemy route developed, because every expansion decision could make future waves easier or much harder. The elevation system also added extra strategy, since tower placement was not only about location but also height advantages. I liked experimenting with different factions, leaders, and upgrade combinations because they made each run feel a little different. The short run length made it easy to jump back in for another attempt, and the steady unlocks provided a good sense of progression. My biggest issue was that the story offered very little motivation, and some interface choices became cluttered during longer runs. That earns it a spot in my good tier. Nordhold had several ideas that I appreciated, especially the way it combined village management, resource planning, and tower defense into a single experience. I liked having to think ahead about where resources should go, because every decision could affect future waves. The variety of towers, heroes, upgrades, and events also meant there was usually something new to consider during a run. Watching a well-planned defense hold back large enemy groups was satisfying, and the progression system encouraged me to keep trying after failed attempts. At the same time, the economy system often felt too punishing, and mistakes made early could ruin a run much later. Some enemy types were also difficult to read during chaotic battles. Because of those frustrations, this ultimately lands in my mediocre tier. Bloons TD is the game I kept returning to whenever I wanted a tower defense experience with endless options and replay value. What stood out most was the huge variety of towers, upgrades, heroes, maps, and challenge modes that constantly encouraged me to try new strategies. I enjoyed experimenting with different tower combinations and discovering how powerful certain upgrade paths could become when everything worked together. Even after many hours, there always seemed to be another map to beat, another challenge to complete, or another strategy to test. The amount of content packed into the game is incredible, and it rarely felt repetitive because there was always something new to unlock or master. Very few tower defense games have kept me engaged this long. This belongs without question in my masterpiece tier. Kingdom Rush was the game that showed me how good a traditional tower defense experience could be when every part of it was polished. I loved how each tower had a clear purpose while still offering meaningful upgrade choices that could completely change how it performed. The variety of enemies constantly pushed me to adapt instead of relying on a single strategy, and the hero units added another layer of decision-making during difficult battles. I also enjoyed the colorful art style, memorable maps, and small details that gave the game a lot of personality. Even after finishing levels, the extra challenges encouraged me to come back and improve my performance. Very few tower defense games balance accessibility, strategy, and replay value this well. This secures its place in my masterpiece tier. Gnomes had some interesting ideas that I could appreciate, especially the ability to move units between waves and manipulate enemy paths to create better choke points. I liked how much freedom it gave me to experiment with different layouts, and the variety of factions helped keep runs from feeling exactly the same. There was also a surprising amount of content to unlock, which encouraged me to keep playing and trying new approaches. The problem was that despite those strengths, the game never fully clicked with me. I found the presentation too plain, and after the initial excitement wore off, I was not as invested in the gameplay loop as I wanted to be. Some players will probably get far more out of it than I did. This one ends up down in my trash tier. Heretic's Fork surprised me with its unusual mix of tower defense, card-based progression, and dark office humor. Instead of actively controlling battles, I spent most of my time building stronger combinations through cards and watching my defenses deal with waves of escaping sinners. The card system looked complicated at first, but after a few runs it became much easier to understand. I also liked unlocking new cards, experimenting with different builds, and discovering characters that changed how each run played out. The presentation, pixel art, and funny writing helped give the game personality, especially the small details hidden throughout the interface. My biggest issue was that some runs felt too dependent on luck, and the early progression could be slow. Even with those issues, it offered enough variety, charm, and replayability to earn an excellent tier. Tangy TD stood out because it blended traditional tower defense mechanics with active hero control, which made every battle feel more engaging. Instead of simply placing defenses and waiting, I was constantly moving around the map, repositioning towers, supporting my units, and reacting to threats as they appeared. I enjoyed experimenting with different upgrades, item combinations, and skill tree choices because they allowed me to shape each run in different ways. The progression system also kept me motivated since even failed attempts contributed toward future improvements. There was always another upgrade to unlock or strategy to test. My biggest issue was the balancing, as some builds felt noticeably stronger than others, and a few difficulty spikes pushed me toward extra grinding. Despite those problems, it still earns a place in my good tier. Thronefall combined tower defense, city building, and action combat in a way that kept me engaged through almost every stage. Instead of sitting back and watching defenses do all the work, I was constantly riding across the battlefield, helping defend key areas, collecting resources, and responding to threats wherever they appeared. I liked the balance between growing my economy and strengthening my defenses because every decision felt important. The short, fast-paced stages made it easy to jump into another run, and the wide range of weapons, perks, and modifiers added plenty of replay value. While some later challenges felt much harder than expected, and certain strategies seemed stronger than others, the core gameplay remained incredibly satisfying. Few tower defense games kept me coming back this often. This earns nothing less than a masterpiece tier. That's it for my ranking of tower defense games. From massive upgrade trees to intense late-game waves, these games offered very different challenges. Thanks for watching.